8-1 work together. So we have 2 steps here. Our first step is we are going to be journalizing our closing entries. It says the completed worksheet and chart of accounts of Fix It Now for the month ended April 30th of the current year are given in question assets. On page 8 of the journal provided, journalize the closing entries. Now, it might be a good idea to have your book open while we go through this, just to help you go through those closing entries. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my date. Now we have 4 closing entries that we're going to do. And our first closing entry is we are going to close our income statement accounts that have a credit balance. So I'm going to specifically look at my income statement credit column, and I'm going to scroll down, and I see actually only one account that has a balance, and that is my sales account. So to close that account, if it has a credit balance, to bring it to 0, I need to debit that account. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to debit sales. Remember, I don't have a document number here because it is a closing entry. That's why we have that label of closing entries there. And I'm going to debit that for $21.60. Okay, and then I'm going to credit income summary. Income summary is kind of where I throw those accounts, those numbers into while I'm closing. Oops. Next closing entry is I'm going to close any of my income statement accounts that have debit balances. I'm going to unpin that there. So when I look again, I'm looking at my income statement debit column. I'm going to scroll down, and here are my accounts that I'm going to be closing. Since they have debit balances, to close them and bring them to 0, I need to credit those accounts. So if I'm crediting those accounts, I'm going to be debiting income summary. Now, I don't know the amount right now because I need to total all of those other accounts first. So I'm just going to leave that debit blank. Don't forget to put it in there. I'm going to leave it blank for right now. Now I'm going to put in those expenses that I'm closing. So advertising expense, I'm going to close that with a credit of $460. Next, I have cash short and over. I'm going to close that with a credit of $6. Insurance expense, credit $125. Miscellaneous expense, credit $189. Supplies expense, credit $153. And then I have, scroll down there, and then I have my utilities, and I'm going to credit that for $550. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up those credits then, so I can figure out my debit to my income summary. My debit then to my income summary is $1,483. Now, a trick here, notice this number here and this number equal. So these numbers should equal what I have here. That doesn't necessarily mean that I shouldn't add these up anyway, because if we add them up, it will help us catch any errors. If we wrote numbers wrong or we forgot a number, if we add these up, we will catch that error. Okay, my next closing entry does 2 things. 1, it's going to record my net income or my net loss. And 2, it's also going to close my income summary. So I need to first, because this one is going to change. It's not always going to be the same account that we debit or credit. Okay? So what I need to look at is if I have a net income or a net loss. In this case, I have a net income. And when I think about that, net income is going to increase the owner's capital. And we know to increase capital, we would credit capital. So if I'm going to credit capital, that tells me that I'm going to debit my income summary. So I'm going to debit my income summary for that net income amount of $677. Okay, and then I said that I'm going to credit capital. So I might need to go to my chart of accounts, or I can look here. So it's listed on my worksheet here, or my chart of accounts to figure out my capital name. Connor Whitney Capital, and that I'm going to credit for $677. Okay, my last closing entry then is I need to close my drawing account. So I'm going to put in the date there. And this I need to look at my balance sheet columns. My drawing account is under my balance sheet. So it has a debit balance. So to close it, I need to credit that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to debit my capital account. So I'm debiting that for $1,700. I'm decreasing my capital because drawing decreases capital. And then I'm crediting capital to close it. So when I look here, I have 4 closing entries. My first entry closes my income statement accounts that have credit balances. My next closing entry closes income statement accounts that have debit balances. Next one, I'm going to be recording net income or net loss, and at the same time, I close income summary. And my last one is I'm closing my drawing account. Now, this is the only one that's really going to change. So if I were to have a net loss, it would be flipped. I would debit capital and credit income summary. Grade step 1. Next step. Step number 2 is post closing entries. We're going to post the closing entries. The general ledger accounts do not show all details for the period. The balance shown in each account is the balance after adjusting entries are posted. So up here they're showing us our adjusting entries. Notice those are already posted. And now we are going to post the next accounts. So first I'm going to find my sales account. The date is the 30th. My post reference is journal page 8, so I'm just going to simply put an 8. And I'm debiting that account for $2,160. I need to then find my new balance. I have a credit and a debit, so my new balance is going to be a 0 balance. I would subtract those two. I do need to put a 0 in both the debit and the credit side, showing that it is closed. And we don't want to just put it on one side because that looks like we forgot then to add some numbers in there. So put a 0 on both sides. Account number 410 goes back to the top. Next one, I'm going to go to my income summary. I need to put in the month and the date for this one. My journal page was page 8. This time I'm going to credit, and I'm crediting for $2,160. My new balance simply then will be a credit of $2,160. Account number 330 goes back to my journal. Okay, next, again, I'm going to my income summary account. I do need to put in the new date showing that I have a new post, still on page 8. This time I have a debit and it is $1,483. I now need to find my new balance. So I have a credit and a debit, so I'm going to subtract. My credit number is larger, so that tells me I'm going to have a credit balance of $677. Account number 330 goes back up. Next, we have advertising expense. The 30th, page 8, and I'm going to credit that account for $460. My new balance then, since I have a debit and a credit, I'm subtracting. My new balance is a 0 balance. Account number 510 goes to the journal. Cash short and over. 30th, 8. I'm crediting this one for $6. My new balance is 0. Account number 520 on the journal. Insurance expense. The 30th, age 8. And here I have a credit of $125 and my balance is at 0. Miscellaneous expense. 30th, page 8, a credit of $189, and now I have a 0 balance. Count number 540 onto my journal. Supplies expense, 30th, 8, credit of $153, and I have a 0 balance. 550 back to the journal. Utilities expense, 30th, age 8, credit 550, 0 balance. 560 goes back up. Income summary. The date 30th, page 8. This time I have a debit of $677. Credit and a debit, subtract, so 0 balance. And account 330 goes back up. I'm now going to have you do the next 3 on your own, so pause the video, and once you are done posting those 3, you can start the video again. I have completed my posting. My post reference column is completely filled in. A couple things that I'm going to look at. Here you'll see my capital account. Hopefully you got your correct new balance. And then everything after my capital account should be at a 0 balance. So if I click through these, I should see that the rest of those accounts are at a 0 balance because those are all of our temporary accounts. Once I'm done, I'm grading my final step. Looks like everything looks good. Save and continue. You can now do the 8-1 on your own and then move on to 8-2 lecture.